you so much, everyone, for gathering here to listen to me today and sparing your precious time. My name is Smiti. I'm one of the founders of Advantage Club, and today I'm going to talk about one of my favorite topics to talk about, which is around employee experience, primarily focusing on how you can enable organizations to up their game and build a better X factor. So let's first talk about what exactly is employee experience. Now, there are various ways in which people define experience in general. My ideology of employee experience is that from the point an employee joins an organization to the point they leave the organization, that entire journey is built up of small, small moments. And these moments define what we call as the experience of an employee in an organization, and that also makes a difference when people say that, hey, I am from, say, I'm X ABC company or I'm X XYZ company, and they say it with a lot of pride because they've had a great experience even after they've left that particular organization. So all of these small moments which an employee experiences right from their hiring to the day actually leave the organization defines different points of moments, and those moments really matter. Right from, say, an organization finding me, to an organization hiring me, to onboarding me, to supporting me wherever I need help in terms of mentorship, in terms of growth, to even developing me as a better version of myself, personally, professionally, and also rewarding me if I do well, recognizing me in front of other colleagues, to maybe if I leave the organization offboarding me with respect and eventually remembering me even after I leave the organization. Every point, every moment which I have in that entire life cycle creates my journey of employee experience in that company. Now, and these moments define experience, but how do you actually break it down into proper elements? Now, if you look up online, there's so many papers talking about employee experience, and everyone has their own definition, everyone has their own ideologies. But my favorite is a particular study which I've seen by BetterUp, where they define 6 elements of employee experience, and this is what I'm going to base my entire talk today on. So primarily starting with authenticity, purpose, belonging, social connections, optimism, and engagement. Now, what is interesting here is engagement is often confused with experience. Now, if you look at it here, engagement is actually a part of this entire experience. It's not the heart of experience. There are other concepts and other aspects also which actually define the right employee experience. And we always talk about engagement driving productivity, but interestingly, the relationship between experience and productivity is 6 times higher than engagement and productivity. So that's where it actually makes a difference when you're driving beyond engagement in your organization to drive a better retention rate, lower attrition rate, a better optimistic feeling among employees, and genuinely a better experience. Now, I'm going to talk about each of these one by one. Let's first talk about authenticity. Authenticity, or an authentic engagement experience for an employee, can be divided in 3 parts. One is I see, I hear, and I believe. I see is your visual part, in which when you enter an organization, what do you see around you? Whether it's a physical environment, whether it's a virtual environment, or whether it's a hybrid setup. Whatever you see every day is how your experience gets eventually mapped out in that company. Conversational is when you hear your colleagues, when you hear people in the organization talk about your company. If it's a positive vibe everywhere, then you end up becoming a more positive agent in the organization. If everyone is saying, hey, I'm looking for jobs, everyone around you is just, sending their resumes left, right, and center, you automatically get psychologically induced to also look for another role. And I might see something, I might hear something, but what matters is what I experience myself, and that's a third part, which is experiential, that everyone around me might be really happy, but maybe my experience was not that great in the company. So that is what forms your authentic engagement in any organization, which brings me to my second part around engagement itself. Engagement is such a vast topic. I can do another 20 minutes on that. So what I've tried to do is just bring maybe 5 elements of engagement just in one slide to cover everything in a very short span. First, so this is like a study by Harvard Business Review, in which what they did is they identified the drivers of engagement for the US healthcare industry. Now, while this is specifically done for US healthcare, I feel this is very common, this is generic for even non-healthcare, non-US, any industry, any geography, any country or any culture. Typically, these are the drivers which drive engagement, and it eventually drives higher productivity. The first one is your leadership, where leadership needs to be involved, leadership needs to be empowered to actually drive a better engagement in your organization. Typically, the challenge where leadership comes in, and again, this is a fun fact that leaders, the level of engagement leaders feel, if you look at any surveys or across the world, is actually lesser than the level of engagement managers or managers of managers feel. Primarily because leaders are usually not connected to the end employee in the organization, and vice versa. So the more involved leaders are in terms of driving your cultural values, driving your right factors in the organization, drives a higher employee engagement. Second is stress balance and workload. Stress balance and workload does not mean that, okay, I have a lot of work. It means that I am not able to manage my work. It also primarily comes from factors that, say work-life balance, or something around a company under hiring. So 5 people are doing, say, 20 people's jobs. That adds to your stress balance and workload as well. The third predecessor of engagement is goals and objective settings. Is the employee actually aligned to the end goal of the organization? If I'm doing something, do I know why I'm doing it? What is the final end role, and what is the benefit I'm giving to the organization in terms of an ROI? Career development. We all have heard this line, right? Why am I looking to change my job? There is no growth here. There is no career development here. I personally feel that I'm not growing in the organization, and that itself is a very big predecessor for engagement itself. And supervisors. While this is healthcare industry, so they say supervisors and stuff, but this is again easily deployable for managers, super managers, and managers of managers itself. So the idea of a manager being involved in an employee's growth, treating employees with respect, making their acts consistent with their words, all of those eventually drive to a higher engagement and thereby a higher productivity. The next piece is around optimism. Optimism, again, is a broader area. I feel it can be divided in 4 parts. The basic format of optimism is positivity, and this is like one of my favorites because I'm a very big follower of positivity in my life, not just professionally but also personally. Because again, psychologically, 90% of all thoughts you get every day in your head are negative thoughts. Only 10% are actually positive thoughts. And negativity is like the easiest thing to spread. If you can actually identify those positive change makers in your company, if you can reward positive behaviors, if you can make the psychology of your organization switch towards a more positive experience, that adds to a higher optimism and therefore a better employee experience in the organization. Resilience, we've all seen that during COVID, right? It was a classic example of resilience. Organizations who were able to be resilient, they flourished, and the ones who were not perished. What is an organization's resilience? It is the resilience of the employees itself. There is no such thing as a only organizational resilience. Mindfulness does not mean you do a mental wellness session. Of course, that helps, but mindfulness is a state of mind beyond that. When you're in an organization, there are days in which you feel like you're at the top of the world and you are getting awarded, you're getting appreciated, everybody loves you and you're like amazed. And the next day, you just want to leave everything and go and take like Vipassana in the Himalayas, right? So it's a very, I'd say a roller coaster ride, right? So one day you're at the top and the other day you're feeling completely at the bottom. It's a hard journey, and by default, creating a sense of mental peace and mindfulness and the ideology that it is going to be stressful, but how do you actually manage it is what drives to better optimism in any organization. And lastly, openness, which talks about transparency, and transparency should actually be part of your cultural values, where people are completely clear about what is happening in the organization. They embrace new experiences. We've all seen situations in which projects are shelved, new projects are being launched. From a business perspective, this is like obvious that, okay, this project is being shelved, but think about the 20 people working on that project. Are they disengaged? Do we have to build an optimism again, because they have been dedicating so many of their hours to actually build this, and hence optimism becomes a really important piece in terms of driving openness as a culture as well. Next is your purpose and meaning, and again, this is kind of something which comes out of optimism itself. Again, purpose is defined by the first two things here. Purpose is, do I understand what I'm doing? Is my work mattering to the organization? And how is this aligned with the larger goal of the organization? Do I care just about doing my work? Or do I actually care about doing my work perfectly well? Those are two different things altogether. Purpose also comes from the sense of satisfaction and achievement. If I have done my work well, am I getting recognized for it? Are people appreciating me for it? Is there some sort of a gamification or reward mechanism for me to feel that, okay, I have done a great job and hence, this is something I can continue doing for a longer time? Meaning actually comes from interpersonal connections as well. Think about it, if you have 1,000 employees, you have 1,000 people around you who are working towards one common goal, one common organizational goal, which is very, very interesting, right? All of us want one single thing. There might be other things we have in common. So the more interpersonal relationships we're able to develop in the workplace, the better it becomes for me to feel that, okay, my life has meaning, my work has meaning, and what I'm doing everything from 9 to 5 actually has meaning. And again, that brings me to my next point, talking about interpersonal connections, social connections. Now, I've already spoken about what interpersonal and social connections mean. This is like a really interesting study which I've found by Gallup. Now, it talks about pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. Now, if you think of it, pre-pandemic, 60% of people were fully on-site. My numbers were actually expected to be 80%. I was surprised that even pre-pandemic, 32% people were hybrid. But 60% of people were fully on-site. And look at Gallup studies that 2022 and beyond, 53% are going to be hybrid. And the expectation for an employee, almost 60% employees want to be hybrid. Now, think of this from a shift perspective, right? 60% people working on-site are most probably in the future going to be hybrid. How do you build social connectivities then? You don't have people holding in one office anymore. They are working from home, they're working from office, they have kids crying in the background, they have spouses and parents asking you to bring dhania from the shop, and it's really complicated, right? So driving social connections in a hybrid setup becomes a really, really big challenging problem, which is where I feel technology plays a very, very important role. Like at Advantage Club, we have created a concept called as hobby clubs, in which you create those groups of like-minded people and people can interact with each other in a digital format. You want to hang out after work, you do that. But there is also a way to connect people digitally, and there are various tools and options available digitally online where you can utilize to drive this 60% upcoming hybrid workforce to connect with each other without being actually face-to-face present in the office next to each other. And the last piece, which brings me to the end of the 6 pointers, is belongingness. Again, belongingness is a very vast topic. I've divided it in 2 slides here. First, let's talk about belongingness via managers. How do you enable that managers are able to drive the right sense of belongingness in the organization? I feel I belong in the organization if my manager recognizes good work, which I do. If my manager gives me feedback to improve genuinely. If my manager responds to my concerns and not just, kind of hypothetically respond, but genuinely responds and works on my concerns. If my manager publicly credits my contributions, then I always say that you criticize privately and you recognize publicly. And lastly, if my manager empowers me as a person to grow, to actually learn and understand what is my career growth in my company overall. Belongingness can also be driven by peers. To be driven by peers, what I need from my peers to feel that I belong in this organization is, one, I want my peers to connect with me. I don't want to be that person who goes to work and then doesn't talk to anybody and then comes back home, right? I want them to connect with me in work, outside work if possible. I want my peers to give me honest and timely peer feedback. Now, peer feedback is so interesting as a concept because you don't judge your peers when they are giving feedbacks, nor they are judging you. You're not worried that, okay, my manager has given me a bad feedback, I'm going to get a bad appraisal, or I'm going to, be kicked out of the company. It's a peer feedback. It actually helps you improve your manager feedback as well. If my peers praise my work, if my peers thank me for anything good I've done for them, creating a culture of thanking each other, a culture of appreciating each other in the organization. And lastly, honest and open communication among peers, transparency in terms of policies, transparency in terms of, issue resolution. And again, when you have 100 people in a room, 20 are going to fight. So resolving those conflicts in the right manner is where peers actually drive that belongingness, where I feel that, okay, I'm part of something larger, I'm part of an organization, I'm part of a larger set of family, because we spend more than 50% of our life at work, and not having that belongingness really drives a lower employee experience for any employee. So lastly, I think all of this confines to one single piece, that at the end of the day, there is no specific mantra. The only way is to put your employees first, understanding their requirements, and thereby driving a better experience, creating a higher sense of productivity, and thereby improving your DEIs, driving a better culture, and making your organization future ready. One of the things which I feel also impact experience as a factor, again, is, we've already spoken about purpose, we've spoken about leaders, technology, and social connects, but I also want to spend 1 minute and talk about strategy. Just don't deploy an experience program just because everybody else is doing it. I feel it has to be connected to your business objectives, your goals as a company. What do you want to achieve? What is the strategy which you want to drive? And accordingly, the right set of programs should be deployed in the organization. And also, let's not forget about infra. Now, physical infra does not mean just having a fancy office. Physical infra, if you're having employees working from home, do they even have chairs and tables? Do you have disability accessibility available? Do you have setups in which you can enable hybrid work, where 2 days I'm working from work and the rest of the days I'm working from home? Lastly, I just want to, just end this note on saying that to make an organization future ready, you have to engage employees, you have to reward employees, and you have to celebrate every moment, every small celebration. And that's what we at Advantage Club do. We help organizations create a world-class employee experience, understand their requirements, and accordingly overall help sustain the retention, drive a better sense of employee engagement within companies by creating curated custom programs for them. As a ending note, I also want to talk about that, I've seen a lot of times people come up with ideas that, okay, I'm going to build my entire policy, and only when I build my policy, I'm going to deploy these things. I don't think we should delay anything related to employee experience. We can start small. You don't have a large budget, it's okay. Start basic with celebrating birthdays, with celebrating anniversaries. Start somewhere so that by the time your policy is ready, you don't lose out on a lot of very important talent within the company. Experience overall is everything with anything. And that's the last pointer I want to leave you hanging with. My name is Smiti. Thank you so much for listening to me. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.